Welcome to the local campaign. Our debate today is for Ward 19, Cumberland Ward. There are 3 candidates who are seeking your vote on October 22nd in the municipal election. I'm going to introduce the participants in the debate in just a moment, but let me first go over the rules for our debate today. There are 2 candidates here for the debate, and each of those candidates will have 1 minute to provide an opening statement. The order for those opening statements was drawn at random just before we started. Then we'll move through a series of debates on the important issues in Cumberland Ward and throughout the city of Ottawa. In each case, I'll start off a topic by directing a question to one of the candidates. That candidate will have 45 seconds to respond to the question, and then we'll open it up to both candidates for some debate on that particular topic. At the end of the debate, we'll go back to the candidate to whom the question was originally directed, and he or she will have 30 seconds to wrap up on that topic. We'll move through a number of different topics that way. We might have time for some questions where each of the candidates will answer in turn without any debate towards the end of our discussion today, and then we'll wrap up with closing statements in the opposite order of the opening statements. So let's meet the people who are here for our debate for Cumberland Ward. They are Jette and Stephen Blais. And Jensen Boire is also running for your vote on October 22nd in Cumberland Ward, but was not able to attend the debate. So let's begin with the opening statements, and we'll start with Stephen Blais. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you to Rogers for focusing on community news. My name is Stephen Blais, and I have the great honor of being the City Councillor for Cumberland Ward. I grew up in this ward in Queenswood Heights, and my wife Marta and I are raising our son here in Chaparral. Prior to being elected in 2010, I served our community as a volunteer, a minor sports coach, a community association president, and a school board trustee. Our community is a microcosm of Canada. With its rich rural heritage, francophones and anglophones, new Canadians all living and playing side by side. But if you lived in the East End before 2010, you know how frustrated and ignored our community was. That's changed. In the past 8 years, we've seen $750 million invested in East End infrastructure. This means more bus routes and better roads, 12 new parks, and the first pool in Ottawa since amalgamation in Orleans. All this has helped us make the biggest jobs announcement in the history of the East End, with 600 jobs coming with Amazon and Carlsbad Springs. There's more still to do, and I hope I can do it for you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And now with your opening statement, Jette, go ahead. You have 1 minute.
Hi, so my name is Cameron Rose Jette. I'm 20 years old and I'm a third-year student at Carleton University in the Human Rights and Social Justice program. And I am a community activist who is passionate about mental health advocacy, disability justice, student issues, feminism, LGBTQ rights, and Indigenous sovereignty. I grew up as an engaged member of my community in South Fallingbrook, and I'm here today to shake up municipal politics while providing a voice to the voiceless in my community. My campaign is based on 4 main points: diversity, accessibility, education, and health and safety. For diversity, I like to focus on my support for a Women's Bureau, an Indigenous Council, and programs to mentor young people who are interested in getting into politics. When I speak about accessibility, I think of accessible transportation, accessible parks and recreation, and accessible housing. For me, education is I focus on the sex ed curriculum that I would...
That's time.
Thank you.
We'll have more time to get into the issues over the course of the discussion. So let's get right to our first question and debate topic. And I'll direct this question to Stephen Blais to start out. You'll have 45 seconds. So light rail is still not up and running in Ottawa. It's a little bit later than we expected. The city, there is a chance, may incur some additional costs associated with that delay, and a $1 million penalty that we thought was going to be imposed on the construction consortium didn't actually apply under the circumstances. So do you feel that City Council has handled the oversight of the project properly, or do you think there was a failure in oversight?
I think the oversight of the project has been very good. We have a professional team of engineers, managers, and elected officials who have taken direct responsibility for overseeing the process of procurement and construction. I think perhaps where there was a challenge was in communication. The contract was very clear that the penalty could be waived with a certain amount of notice and reassigned with the new delivery date. If they miss their date in November, that penalty will apply. And we are very confident confident in our legal position and our business position, as well as the length of the contract and the relationship we plan to have with RTG, that we'll recover any incurred additional costs to taxpayers as a result of this delay from the builders.
Okay, it's open to both of you now to debate this and transit issues in general.
So for me, I think when I think of oversight, definitely even just the construction itself of the LRT, and I specifically think of Rideau Street and the way in which some oversight caused great delays in both transit users, but also anybody trying to access downtown with the sinkholes that happened. And I think that could have been avoided if the oversight wasn't in place.
Well, I'm not sure what sitting in an office building has anything to do with avoiding a sinkhole. That was an unfortunate situation. The constructors, we believe, caused that problem, and that is an error of actually doing work on the ground. What we did do is ensure that the contract had clauses to protect taxpayers, to ensure that additional costs were transferred on to the builders and not absorbed by taxpayers to either increase the costs of taxes or transit fares. We have an ambitious plan to bring light rail to all corners of the city. If you remember, before I was elected, there was no plan to bring LRT to Orleans at all. Sometime after 2031, we didn't really know when. Now it's going to arrive to Trim Road in 2022. We're going to have 4 stations in Orleans. We're going to expand the park and ride at Trim Road. We're building a new park and ride at the corner of Navin and Brian Coburn. Earlier this year, we eliminated the premium for express payers. Everyone in Orleans knew that the express service was no longer providing you the value for the premium price you were paying. So instead of paying $130 a year, you're now paying $116. That's saving families up to $200 a year. With the Presto Pass, your bus pass is now transferable. This is something I promised in my first campaign. So you buy your pass to get to work to and from every day. In the evening, you can hand it off to your children to go to part-time jobs, go to the movie theater, etc. We've made this transit system more accessible with low-floor buses, and we've modernized the totality of our paratranspo fleet to bring the best technology to bear and the best service to the residents and OC Transpo users here in Ottawa.
Just to quickly wrap it up, I think as a paratranspo user, I'd really like to hear a little bit what you had to say on how you would actually work towards making paratranspo and OC Transpo as accessible as you claimed it to be.
Okay, well, Stephen Blais, you get the final 30 seconds on this topic, so you can speak about that or the issue more generally, if you like.
Sure. Well, on paratranspo, we've modernized. We've replaced the entire fleet with modern buses designed for accessibility. We also did a very comprehensive consultation with the ridership and users of paratranspo, and we're continuing that dialogue to modernize how trips are booked, whether that's online and telephone, and so on and so forth. Remember, before 2010, there was no plan to bring LRT to Orleans, ever. Now we're going to have it in 2022, service every 4 minutes or less, right to Trim Road.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to the next topic now, and I'll direct this question to Cameron Jette. Should we have had higher tax increases in the past 4 years, above 2%, to invest more money in infrastructure and services? You've got 45 seconds to get us started.
Thank you. So, as I mentioned before, I am only 20 years old, and I haven't actually had to pay any land taxes yet, thankfully. But I think that even just going off what the people in my life say, I think seeing where the taxes can go and where they will be going and what I hope to use these taxes for if I were to be elected, I am happy with where they stand, and I hope that any excess money that these bring in will be directed towards useful services for the community, including supervised injection sites or a variety of different affordable housing and accessible housing initiatives.
Okay, it's open to both of you now on the subject of city finances, and if there's an opportunity and you feel like you'd like to, you can perhaps talk about what level of tax increase you'd like to see over the next 4 years.
Well, thanks, Mark, and I appreciate that opportunity. Residents in Orleans and Cumberland remember the years of 4% and 5% tax increases. None of us likes to pay taxes, but we're willing to do it to live in a civilized society as long as we're getting value. Unfortunately, prior to 2010, there was no value in Orleans. Roads weren't being maintained. There was no investment in recreation. We didn't have a plan for light rail. Since my election, not only have taxes been stabilized at a very predictable 2%, we've seen $750 million invested in infrastructure. That includes the light rail extension to Trim Road, that includes the widening of Trim, that includes the extension of Brian Coburn Boulevard, the first new pool since amalgamation built in Orleans with the François Dupuis Centre, that includes an $8 million expansion of Millennium Park. All of that money came from development charges. Not a single tax dollar was used for that expansion of Millennium Park, which has led to an artificial turf field and probably the best splash pad in the entire city right here in Orleans. I've always supported reasonable changes to taxation as long as there's value back to taxpayers. And that is the priority that I'm going to bring forward to keep the city affordable and to make sure that for the money we send to City Hall, we get some of it in Orleans and Cumberland, including record investments in rural infrastructure with the resurfacing of Dunning Road, Colonial Road, Rockdale Road, Will Haven, and I'm committing to ensure that in the next term of council, French Hill gets the tender loving care it so desperately needs.
Okay. Cameron, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so one thing that I really think about when I think about taxes is people complain often about the increase in taxes and there's no bang for their buck. But I think even one thing that I am very passionate about this election is and I know you would definitely disagree with me on this, is taking on some of the responsibility that unfortunately other governments have decided to drop. Because we need to support our citizens and we need to make sure that they are provided for. And one of the things
problem with that approach is what the council used to do when they debated the war in Iraq and all sorts of issues that have nothing to do with city council. Governments are efficient and they spend taxes wisely when they focus on their priorities. The city's priorities are roads, police, garbage collection, recreation, core services. If you want to deal with education and healthcare, run for MPP or run for Member of Parliament next year.
Okay, Cameron, Jette, you get the last 30 seconds on this. Go ahead.
Well, I think that when you compare it to the war in Iraq, it's very much different. The war in Iraq is literally in another continent versus supervised injection sites or education, which is affecting your citizens that are your neighbors. They are the people who are living in your riding, and so I think it is very important that if these things are being dropped by other people, we still take care of our own. This isn't discussing something that's happening in a different continent. This is your neighbors. These are the people who are living down the street. It's not. Yeah.
And the soldiers going to fight
Okay.
overseas are my neighbors too.
That's outside the format of the debate. So we're going to move to the next topic now. I'll direct a question to Stephen Blais. When you were first elected to City Council, you said you were in favor of term limits, and you said you would serve only 2 terms. You're running for a 3rd term now. Do you no longer believe term limits are a good idea? And are there any changes that you would make to the format and structure of City Council?
Well, thanks very much for that question, Mark, and the opportunity to address that. I suffered a very public health situation in 2013, nearly died a few times, and that really changed my perspective on a lot of things in life, including the fact that we have a very limited time to make a big difference in our community. And as a result, I apologize if I've created any cynicism about politics, but when we look at the things that we've accomplished for the last 4 years, or the last 8 years, whether it's the plan to bring LRT to Orleans, the expansion of recreation opportunities, hundreds of millions of dollars invested in roads. I think we've done a really good job to bring about real positive change for the residents of Orleans and Cumberland, and that's change I want to continue to bring to our families.
All right, it's open to both of you, not just on term limits, but on any other changes potentially to how City Council works, is structured, and so on.
So one of the things that I stand for in this election is giving the opportunities for people who don't have a voice to speak and to represent their communities. And I think that if we don't enforce term limits, or at least some sort of limit on the amount of times that a certain person can run, this is never going to happen, because it's unfortunate, but a lot of people do have certain viewpoints, and the same people will end up getting elected year after year after year if we don't put any stop to that. So I think that, for example, if in Cumberland, we've never had a person who has been a councillor or even a mayor before an amalgamation that was not a white man. So if there was no ability to stop the same person from running over and over and over again, when are we ever going to have the opportunity for someone who's not that same demographic to represent the community?
Well, elections have consequences. I defeated an incumbent, a two-term incumbent, both when I ran for school trustee and when I ran for city council. We have, in fact, had women represent Cumberland. In the old township days, Linda Dunn, who was a supporter of mine, was deputy mayor. She was one of the individuals who brought recycling to Cumberland Township. Fran Stronach was also on Cumberland Township Council prior to amalgamation. Certainly ensuring that we have a diversity of opinion and representation is important, but it's also important that people step up to the challenge, that they educate themselves about the issues and they put forward ideas and a vision for our community. I'm proud to be supported by a wide range of community leaders, minor sports advocates, community association leaders, parent council leaders, because they believe that the vision I've put forward for Orleans and Cumberland, in fact, for the entire city of Ottawa, is what they want and need for their families.
I would like to say that I also have lots of support from a variety of different individuals who find that the people who sit in council right now are not giving the opportunity for people who are marginalized and who have voices that are not being heard on council, and they believe that I can be that voice. And that's why I'm here today, and that's why I'm running for city council, is because I think that if people like me, if people who are marginalized in a variety of different senses, if they don't step up and take that first step, that those barriers are never going to be broken down. And I hope that even if I do not win this election, that someone next election or someone in any election of any level of government feels that they can take this stand as well.
All right, thank you. Stephen Blais, I asked you the question, so you've got 30 seconds to wrap up.
Well, thanks. I'm very proud of the work we've accomplished over the last 8 years in Cumberland, keeping taxes predictable and responsible for families, investing in recreation, the expansion of the Francois Dupuis Centre, the Trans-Orleans multi-use pathway through Avalon, the expansion of roads and more bus service. If re-elected, I'm committing to bringing a dome to Millennium Park and building a massive 19-hectare park beside the Francois Dupuis Centre. And those are the types of investments that I'd like to be able to deliver for the residents and families of Cumberland.
Okay, thank you. Next question I'll direct to Cameron Jette. What can the city do to ensure that there's more employment in the East End, which has been a chronic issue, I think, for a lot of residents? You've got 45 seconds.
So in terms of employment, I think I can speak for both of us when I say that we're excited about the Amazon development that will be taking place in Carlsbad Springs. That will bring over 1,000 jobs to construction and 600 jobs of full-time positions within the distribution center. And so I think this is going to set a precedent for the amount of the ability of our community to host these large distribution centers, these large employment hubs where people can find jobs in our sector, in a variety of sectors in our community, because for a long time people thought of Cumberland, people thought of the suburbs as very much not a hub for any sort of employment, and so I really hope that sets a precedent and begins.
Okay, it's open to both of you now. You can keep going, or?
You know, certainly economic development is always an important issue in the East End. Too many of us have to commute into the city, which takes time away from our families. And I agree, we are very excited about Amazon coming to Carlsbad Springs with 600 jobs. They're coming to Carlsbad Springs as a direct result of the work that I did. We focused on that particular business park as a prime location for rural economic development, and we worked very hard to attract a major employer there, and that's just the start. We've already had interest from a number of other employers to locate close by. One of of the other things I'm very proud of is bringing in the Community Improvement Plan for Orleans. It's the only suburban community where tax credits are available to redevelop underutilized sites. So imagine the parking lot at Place Orleans or at the No Frills. Right now it's vacant most of the day. If you bring an office building to those locations, you attract 15 jobs or more in life sciences, the environment, technology. You'll be eligible for tax breaks for up to 10 years. We've already had some success with that program, and when we think about the LRT corridor to Orleans, where is it? What's beside it? It's all those empty parking lots and old abandoned grocery stores and warehouses. Those are prime for redevelopment. And I'm convinced that in 10 or 15, 20 years from now, the core of Orleans, right around the LRT stations, is going to be a downtown economic hub for the East End. We've also focused a lot on jobs in the rural area. In addition to attracting Amazon to Carlsbad Springs, I was very proud to help attract the Hydro One office to Navan, which has brought local jobs, and they plan to expand that facility to bring even more jobs to our rural community. And we're going to continue to put our focus on ensuring that more jobs come to Orleans so that fewer and fewer of us have to commute downtown, whether that's by car or by bus.
So I would like to just talk a little bit about just the actual seeing of the expansion in Orleans. So when I was born, my house kind of sat in a big field and there was nothing around it. But now, if I were to drive down the road, there's communities, there's sports centers, there's Millennium Park, there's a variety of grocery stores and different shops that did not exist when I was a young child. And so I think even just looking at that, I can see that the
you can keep going because you have the last 30 seconds on this anyway.
Our economic development, it is there, and I've seen it firsthand. And just looking at my community since when I was a young child, where I sat in a field, to now where I sit in a mecca of a variety of different shops and stores and bus routes and different parks and recreation things in my community. And I think that shows that we have economic development opportunities in Orleans that I think can be developed even further.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move now to a couple of questions where I'm just going to direct a question to both candidates, and they'll each have 60 seconds to respond to that question. So the first question is, what specific steps would you take to reduce gun violence in Ottawa, a rising concern for many residents? Stephen Blais, we'll go first to you. You have 1 minute.
Well, thanks very much, Mark, and that is certainly a big concern for the city. We're very fortunate that Orleans is a very safe community by and large. For the last 3 years, we've added 25 police officers to the complement of the Ottawa Police Service. You know, the men and women of the police can do an amazing job when provided the right resources, and we have to ensure that they're able to meet the demand of our growing city and the more complicated nature of some of the crime that's happening in our city as a result of that growth. So I fully support continued investment in police resources, particularly in the Guns and Gangs unit. They've demonstrated that when they're properly resourced, when they have the tools at their disposal and the people and bodies at their disposal to investigate these guys, they can bring this criminal element to justice and ensure that the bad guys are brought off our streets.
Okay, thank you. Cameron Jette, same question to you.
So for me, I'm very much and this will be a very controversial opinion, as I don't think that the solution is within a police force. I think that we definitely need to focus as a community, as a city, on ways of protecting our own that don't involve adding more violence to the situation. I think I'm very much pro restorative justice, reparative justice that focuses on working with the community, working with the people who are affected by the gun violence, the different forms of violence that happen in these communities, and working towards a way to resolve these conflicts and that don't involve locking up human beings in cages. And so I think, I know this will be a very controversial opinion, and I understand that, but I won't agree with Stephen on the fact that we should just add more cops to solve the problem. I think we need to really focus on other ways to work on it.
Next question, again for both candidates, and we'll start with Cameron Jette this time. I think you already said you're in favor of creating a women's bureau at
Yes.
City Hall. So what specifically would that women's bureau do, and what other measures could be taken to encourage diversity and equality in city decision making?
So I think even just me existing here, sitting at this table, debating with someone who's run twice in a way that I am, I think that is already starting to break down the barriers of people who are marginalized in a variety of different ways, seeing that, you know what, I can run for council, I can be a politician, I can do these things. And so for me, the reason I'm passionate about a women's bureau or our different kinds of ways to highlight marginalized voices and encourage marginalized folks to be involved in politics, I think a lot of it is just the support. What a women's bureau necessarily would do, I don't think a lot of people know. I think it's just the concept of having the ability to support each other and support other women who want to get involved in politics. Currently, in a council of 24 people, only 4 of them are women. When you have almost 1 million people in a city, 4 out of 24 is not nearly enough. And so I think that women's bureau or any other sort of thing would just kind of highlight those voices.
Okay. Stephen Blais, same question to you. Would you support a women's bureau, and what steps could be taken on diversity and equality in city decision making?
Well, certainly I supported Councillor Deans in her motion to have city staff review what a women's bureau would do and bring that forward to new term of council. I think that's really the important part. A women's bureau can be very effective to engage our members of our community to get more involved in their community, whether it's politics or other aspects of community life. But it has to mean something and it has to do something. Creating an office that would simply help a politician achieve a promise will just drive cynicism into the population. We need to reach out, whether that's to schools, churches, mosques, areas where people that feel marginalized congregate, to understand how they can be brought in to civil society in an organized way so that they can benefit from the amazing city we live in the best country on earth.
Okay. Thank you both. We're going to move to the closing statements now. And once again, we'll do those in the opposite order of the opening statements. That was drawn at random before our telecast. So we'll start with Cameron Jette. You've got 1 minute.
So as a disabled transgender youth, I have never seen someone like me representing our city in City Hall. Even just looking at the councillors and the mayor for 2014 to 2018, there was 4 women and only 1 person who identified as LGBTQ. And then looking back at Cumberland in specific, since amalgamation, there has been not a single person who wasn't a cisgender, heterosexual white man representing our community. And I hope to be that person to change municipal politics and support our marginalized community members and by raising up their voices and highlighting their experiences in council. For me, I can remember being involved in politics since I was a young child. I can distinctly remember cold calling individuals saying, "Go vote," at 8 years old in my living room with my father. And for me, I think that being a municipal politician or a politician in general is just the logical next step for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Stephen Blais, your closing statement.
Well, it's been an honor to serve the residents of Cumberland as your city councillor for the last 8 years. If you lived in the East End before 2010, you know we're much better off now in 2018. But more work is still needed. The $750 million invested in the East End has meant reduced commute times by car and by public transit. We've built 12 new parks, the first pool since amalgamation, and we've protected sensitive environmental lands. Now more than ever, the East End needs experienced hands to help ensure that LRT is delivered on time to Trim Road, that Ottawa remains an affordable city, and that we continue to move forward on environmental protection. I'm so very proud of the $5 million investment in the Trans-Orleans Pathway System that connects Avalon north and south, east and west, that sees hundreds of our neighbors using it each and every night. And if re-elected, I'm committing to further investments in recreation, to bring a dome to Millennium Park, and to build a massive 19-hectare park beside the François Dupuis Centre. Together, we've achieved a lot, and we can achieve even more. Thanks very much.
Thank you both for being part of the debate for Cumberland Ward, and thank you for watching. Rogers TV and 1310 News will have live election results on October the 22nd, starting at 8 o'clock. Hope you can join us then. Thanks for watching.